Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. Jason, I'm a late intermediate lifter. I'm trying out your random max effort conjugate lifts for singles you've been doing with volume after all these lifts, all for 10 rep sets. Do you suggest that I regularly work outside of 1s and 10s, or are these really the only rep schemes needed for something like this? Well, it's what you see me doing. Now, the exception would be some of my smaller exercises, and I can jump into that in a minute. And I'll probably kind of put this into a system eventually. We might call it something like orc mode maxing or whatever. But yeah, let's say you try to do this, 4 days a week. Because 4 is a good, reasonable way to start for most people. If you think about it, you're already getting the tension you need, right? The max effort lift, if you're starting every training session with close to a 1 rep max, anything that's in the 95% range, you're up above 90%. You're getting training for maximum strength. You're getting intermuscular and intramuscular coordination. Right? You're getting all the coordination you need. You're learning to strain against a heavy weight. You're also hitting the upper threshold fibers. Even if you ramp up in singles, those last 3 to 4 singles are hitting the upper threshold fibers because you're working with weights that are within your 5 rep max for one heavy rep pushing really hard. Okay, so you're getting already the equivalent of at least a 5 rep set in terms of a heavy 5 rep set in terms of training response. You're hitting all these upper threshold fibers. Everything else that you do in this training session after that really needs to be geared towards maximizing training volume in comparison to your stimulus versus fatigue ratios. And yeah, I know Dr. Mike and a lot of people use that term a lot, but I think that's a fantastic term. I think it's a great term, and it really puts stuff in context. And 10 rep sets generally allow you to do a lot of volume if you pick exercises carefully. They allow you to do a lot of volume and recover from it easy. And there's a lot of exercises that you can do that work well there. And I'm not saying squats and things. Most people struggle with squats and deadlifts for 10s. So you really shouldn't need your classic lifts. If you know how to squat and deadlift already, you don't need to squat and deadlift for that volume work. You can do the maxes for that. And I'll tell you what I mean. You could do a bunch of 10 rep sets on hip thrusts. Things like hip thrusts lend themselves very, very well to 10 rep sets. They build all the muscles you would need for squatting. Look at the data. There have been studies to where at least intermediate women were looked at who did nothing but hip thrusts and nothing but squats. They all saw pretty good improvements on their squats. So doing 8 weeks of nothing but hip thrusts increased their max squat. Why? Because it built their hypertrophy of all the same muscles you need, right? So you pick exercises that allow you to do 10s. Now, I would say the exception to the 10s would be, do you need to practice some of the classic lifts more? Well, if you need to practice some squatting or deadlifting, you might need to do a little bit lower reps for those. Okay? They don't lend themselves well to 10 rep sets. You might have some exercises that work really well for high reps in terms of tendonitis. Let's say the skull crushers. That's a perfect example. You see me doing those tricep extensions. We know, and I know from my own experience, and everyone who's messed with them will tell you, doing lower reps on tricep extensions will kill your elbow tendons. Higher reps aren't necessarily an issue either, though, because even if we're getting some less functional hypertrophy, it's a smaller muscle, it's a lagging muscle. Maybe we need some blood flow. So you know what, some of your smaller movements could be triceps, it could be face pulls, it could be curls, it could be abs. Some of that stuff, if you want to go above 10, is perfectly reasonable. Perfectly reasonable. The same thing on some of your 10 rep sets. Maybe you're testing your limits. Like maybe you're going to hit your 5th set or whatever, your 3rd set, and see how many reps you can get. You might do an AM rep just to see if you need to go ahead and start increasing the weight. Okay, so there's deviations from it, but generally speaking, I think this system can work very, very well doing nothing but singles and 10s. It covers everything that you need, with the exception of some specific exercises might benefit from varying from it, right? Like if you wanted to do more squatting, just to practice squatting, okay? You don't want to do 10s for that. Face pulls, some of your smaller movements that again can inflame tendons. You might do 15s or 20s on those, and it's perfectly reasonable. All right, next question. Do you have strength standards for a woman? Generally speaking, are women able to get good enough at pull-ups for it to be beneficial and progressive, or is there an alternative when your main gym is a home power rack? All right, let's kind of stick with the first question first, the strength standards part. I don't generally give strength standards for women, and we'll jump to pull-ups in a minute. I don't give strength standards to women because the strength standards that I have given people are for guys to look generally jacked top to bottom. That if you can reach this entire set of lifts, notice I don't have a strength standard for the deadlift. I threw out that big 5 strength standard. That is a single standard. And I think people fail to grasp that. That was a single standard that if you successfully do all 5 of these at the same time, you are going to look jacked and look like you're big and strong top to bottom. You're going to look like you live walking down the street in your t-shirt and blue jeans, and you're going to look big top to bottom, reasonably big. Okay. Well, for women, I'm going to say it's the same strength standard. Like for a woman to look like she's jacked walking down the street in a t-shirt, I mean, think about that for a moment. That is the strength standard, was to look jacked and look big walking down the street and have good body composition. Say for a woman, maybe cut 10% off those, right? So a woman to look like she's really jacked walking down the street in a t-shirt, she probably needs to be able to bench above 200 pounds. She probably needs to have a 450 deadlift. Because how many women do you see who are generally jacked in clothes? I don't mean a woman who's in a bikini. I'm talking looking big and jacked, looking cock diesel, who doesn't use gear. I mean, even women on gear, most of them don't look jacked in person. So would the strength standard be dramatically different? Of course not. And the other thing I would point out, 99.9% of women who lift, their goal is not to look like a gorilla when they're walking down the street. They're not trying to have someone go, man, that chick is cock diesel, Jesus Christ. Right? No, that's not most women's goal. So the strength standard would still apply if that was your goal. So let's come over to the point. How do women need to see how they stack up? Use strength and conditioning charts. Like if you just want to compare yourself to what is a relative strength as far as rankings go, type in strength standards. You'll notice all those charts have a men's chart and they have a women's chart. You can look at your relative body weight and look at that chart and it will tell you a lot. Now, a lot of people say, well, I'm weak for the body weight, but if I was a lighter body weight over here, I would be at this intermediate level or whatever, right? Well, then you probably are carrying a little bit more body fat than is ideal. Those charts are generally based around determining basically about how much muscle you've gained relative to your frame size. That's what those charts are useful for. That's why they're kind of classified as novice, intermediate, advanced, whatever. It really is not necessarily fully to tell you what program to run. It's to tell you how you have progressed. In other words, about how much muscle have you gained. Because size and strength are enormously and massively correlated. All right, they are massively correlated. So those charts will tell you by looking at your height, roughly how many, if you compare 4 or 5 different lifts, 3 lifts, you can look at the squat, bench, deadlift, whatever. They'll tell you about how much muscle you have gained relative to your height, or if you're possibly too fat for your height. Because if you're really weak for your weight class on there, then maybe you're too fat. You know, they just give you an idea of your body composition. That's what those charts do, because that's what strength is. Strength and body composition are enormously correlated, and relative strength completely with body composition. That's all your relative strength tells you, is how fat and how much muscle you gain for your height. Okay? That's what it tells you, more than anything else, because size and strength have 90% overlap. So for women, use those charts. All right, use those charts. They're fine. And as far as me giving standards for what strength is normal for women on my novice program, I don't. I would actually have to see the workout logs of 200 women to give you an idea. And there just aren't that many women that I've seen who logged any of my programs by the dozens for 6 months straight on a forum. For a lot of men, they did. Tons of guys kept logs. I read through about 50 training logs of guys who ran my original ice cream fitness, right? And because I read through the logs of 50 guys and saw their start and beginning progress versus 6 months in or a year in, I was able to say, hey, these are the results people are going to get. I just didn't see that with women, so I don't have data. But I will say women can get strong at pull-ups. So that's your point about pull-ups. I know a woman right now who I've seen do 18 body weight pull-ups. Like I've seen Sumi Singh do 18 pull-ups. She's got a pretty jacked back. I don't think anyone's going to deny that. Now, granted, she's not much over 100 pounds. She's very, very lean. She's got a good back, and she can do 18 pull-ups. So there are women out there who can do some serious pull-ups. There are women out there who do some pretty strong weighted pull-ups. So you can use them, absolutely. But here's, I would say, with the strength standards. You have strength and conditioning charts you can use to assess yourself. And outside of that, just get as strong as you possibly can. Get as strong as you possibly can. Standards are there just to tell you how much you've progressed and what other people are doing relative to it. Right? Those charts can give you an idea of if you've gained appropriate muscle or not for your level of experience, or if maybe you're carrying too much body fat than what is ideal. But standards aren't that useful outside of that, really. Just get as strong as you possibly can. Be the best version of yourself, right? Just get in and get strong, sister. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.